Let's talk about, should you be buying a 12 valve or should you be buying a common rail? Now, I'm not going to get into the truck side of things so much. I'm just talking more about the engine. So whether you're swapping the engine into a 66 Chevy truck or it's going into a 2010 Ford F-350 that's got a blown up Ford engine in it. A lot of it depends on the person, how much power you want to make, how complicated you want the system. They're very similar platforms for any of you guys that have been to lots of them. Obviously, a mechanical engine is much easier service-wise. I can't even say they're cheaper to build because they're not really cheaper to build, depending on what horsepower you're talking about. But the average guy that's putting something in, you're probably not talking more than 500 horsepower. 500 horsepower and down, right? Now, in my opinion, if you're going to go with a 12 valve and you're putting it into any other truck than when it was in there, you're probably going to want 350 to 500 horsepower. That's my opinion, somewhere in there. Now with a common rail, there again, you're starting at 300 horsepower. Well, the lowest one, 305. Well, it could be 265, I guess, technically. But let's say 305 up to 325, or if you go into a 6.7, 345, 365, whatever, in the 300s range, right? Right out of the gate. So that is something that you want to take in consideration of if you're doing a swap or you want to upgrade your engine kind of idea. If you just want a 300, a completely dependable 300 horsepower, whether you do a 12 valve, whether it be a VE or P pump, or any of the common rails, 300 horsepower is very, very easy to get. They're very reliable in all of the applications, no matter what engine you're talking about. If you're talking 5.9 or a 6.7 Cummins, they are all very, very dependable at 300 horsepower, right? Or even 350 horsepower. Let's say 350 horsepower, because most of them, like, they came with 350 horsepower, some the common rails, right? So, or right close to that. Now, if you're going for simplicity's sake, you're just trying to make like a doomsday prepper unit kind of idea, or you're in the middle of nowhere and you don't want to have electronics, that type of thing, then obviously a 12 valve or a mechanical engine, doesn't have to be a 12 valve per se, but a mechanical engine, whether you're going to be at a VE pump on it or you're going to put a P pump on it, that is going to be the best solution as far as that goes. But you don't have to get super carried away. If you're talking that there again, like let's say 350 horsepower, you don't really have to do a lot to them. There's a lot of stuff that I usually recommend to do, only because when you're into the engine, it's cheap insurance. Like doing head studs, I personally would put head studs in absolutely everything that I build if it was in the budget for the customer. Same with upgrading some of the valve train components and like that type of stuff. Certain things like that, I always recommend to upgrade that stuff, just because you're in there, you're already changing stuff. If you're already changing stuff, why not do it and then it's done? Same with on a 12 valve, O-ringing a cylinder head. I recommend to everybody to O-ring and stud a 12 valve. Even if it's not making a lot of power, if you do decide that you want to make more power with it, it's already done. Same with putting valve springs in it. I always recommend doing valve springs on 12 valve as well, especially if you got the head off, right? So, a 12 valve is a really good option for 350 horsepower. Now, when you start getting into over that 500 horse range, they don't run quite as nice. Well, they do run nice. They don't run as clean. They're going to be a little bit harder to start. So there's that side of it, right? Nothing super crazy, but we're not talking crazy horsepower. Now, you go into a common rail. So we're going to talk 5.9. And then if you go into the 6.7 stuff, it's a little bit different because technically, I guess, if you're in the States, you're not supposed to run a 6.7 ECM. Well, you can't get it tuned, I guess. So if you're running a 6.7, you're going to run it on a 5.9 operating system. So we'll just talk about 5.9s, and then if you want to do 6.7, you can just cross that information over into the 6.7. I prefer the 6.7 platform. If I'm doing the 6.7, or if I'm doing a common rail in something, I am doing a 6.7 with a 5.9 operating system. If I'm doing a swap in something, or because I'm in Canada, it's relatively easy to get people to still tune stuff. Like I know a few different guys that will tune stuff for me, and we can, you know, do the stuff we need to do. We'll put a military tune in it, let's say. But talking on the common rail side of things, if you're okay with having electronics and you put, so let's say you're going to rebuild the engine, you rebuild a common rail, you rebuild a 12 valve, just talking the long blocks, you're roughly the same price. They're a 12 valve is just a touch cheaper because the kit's a little cheaper, but it's roughly the same. Now that's not talking crazy horsepower or any of that type of stuff. We're talking 500 horse and down, right? When you get into doing the common rail side of things, I prefer the common rail in certain applications. I do like common rails. I know lots of people think I'm a 12 valve guy only. I'm not only a 12 valve guy, or even a mechanical guy only. It's just that I have lots of mechanical stuff, so I've always just like I've gravitated that way with the channel. Now, common rails are going to be coming down the pipe because I have some common rail stuff I want to do, and I have a bunch of common rail stuff that I would like to put together and get rid of, sell. I shouldn't say get rid of, but sell. So I'm going to do some turnkey engines for swaps and that type of stuff. But you take your 305 horse, 325 horse, which are basically very similar to each other. If you want to put that into, let's say a 68 Ford Highboy, let's say, it's really no more work when it really comes down to it than putting a 12 valve in. Now, if you want to turn the truck up to 500 horsepower, you can do it with a switch. Done. Very simple. You know, yes, okay, injectors are more expensive. CP3, they're really not that expensive, but if you're rebuilding the engine in entirety and you're buying the two engines, to do that, whether it's a common rail or doing a 12 valve, there's really not that much price difference. Now, the reason for that is to rebuild a P-pump to a good quality P-pump with a few upgrades so it runs nice and all that jazz, with a good set of injectors, not cheap junk ones, and then you do the same thing with a common rail, you're probably within a few $100s of each other. Now we're talking stock injectors in the common rail though. If you're going bigger injectors, then obviously it's going to cost more money. But we're talking stock stuff because you can make an easy, you know, on any of the common rails, you can make an easy 400 horsepower on all stock equipment. Now, doing the wiring and that type of stuff, yes, you have to do the wiring, but you can buy wiring, like you can buy standalone kits for these things now. You don't have to really do any wiring. It's like 4 wires. And they're not crazy expensive when it comes down to it. So like for the average guy, if you want a really nice running truck and you don't care if it's electronically controlled, I honestly would lean towards putting a common rail in it, as long as you're okay with having the electric side of the truck, right? But they start nice when they're cold. If you're in cold climate, they idle clean. You know, they're starting at 300 horsepower. And the tunability is really nice because you can flip a dial up and down, right? Okay, I guess it's on the earlier ones, I don't know if you can. That's actually something, let me know for you guys that do tuning. Whether or not, I don't know if the early, like the 03 to 04 and a half, I don't know if you can put them on a dial because I think that's an EFI Live thing. So maybe it's only the later ones you can do. Actually, it'd be 03 to 05, the 06 and 07. The 849 ECMs. I know those ones you can, but I don't know if you can on the early ones. I know you can tune them, but I don't know if you can use it on a dial or not. That was kind of after I never done a lot of, we did some tuning on those, but I never really got into that. As soon as the 6.7 came, we just kind of gravitated to the 6.7 and just ran with that. But that's here nor there. If you can't do the delete on the truck or on the engine, that's really hard to do a swap with it. You have to find the ECM and that type of stuff. Now that is another hindrance. If you're putting a 5.9 into something, you have to find something that has the ECM and all of the wiring harness and all that jazz to be able to function everything. But it's still very simple. It's a very simple setup. Now, if you want to get into something different, then obviously it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're not worried about the money you're spending. You can do P-pump 6.7s, which I really like. But by the time you buy a couple, you buy all the parts and you put it all together, it's a lot of work, right? That's why I was thinking more, talking just on stuff that's already been built per se. So in my conclusion, I guess on that, if you really want to have a really nice clean running engine, it starts nice, gets good fuel mileage, all that stuff, I personally would be looking at buying a 03 to 04 305 horse. Myself personally, I like that piston design better. I like the injector better. You can have them tuned. Now, if you really wanted to get carried away, you could put the 849 ECM from an 0607 and wiring harness onto that engine and still run the right injectors. You got to make sure you run the right injectors. I'll link a video below, actually. Check that video out for that. But that would be the engine I honestly would be looking at, especially in the price of 12 valves nowadays. Like 12 valves are not cheap. I sell quite a few 12 valves, and we do like complete engine packages, which I actually should list on the website because I haven't had that on there I don't think I've ever had on this website. But we do a complete turnkey, like it has the injection pump, turbo, manifold, like it has everything on it. It has a one-wire alternator, everything ready to go. But it's not a cheap package. It's an expensive ordeal. Doing a common rail, honestly, probably would be a little cheaper than doing that at the same horsepower, like talking at 350 horsepower. But the common rail, like I said, is nice that way. I do like my mechanicals. I do. I can't say that I don't. But it just is what it is. Sometimes the common rail is a better solution and easier for guys to use. So if that's you, choose wisely, and we'll catch you on the next one.